Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Wilson. I am one of the many regional sales directors here at Ridge Security Technology. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to join us for this event. This event is going to be fantastic. We're focusing today on how do we go from detection to action using AI-driven vulnerability assessments. And we have a special guest today. But before I introduce him, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's driving, what we feel is driving the evolution, right? So as we all know, organizations use Gartner to just start the project, to start figuring out what type of technologies and solutions they should be looking at. One of the tools that many organizations use, analytic tools, is the hype cycle. And so what you're seeing here is the evolution of vulnerability management, right? Traditional vulnerability management or vulnerability scanning. And what we're seeing is the detection and the time. And so we've already seen that vulnerability management, traditional vulnerability management, has already gone out the other side. But what we're seeing is more continuous, more automated penetration testing and exposure management, which a lot of us already know, CTEM, continuous threat exposure management. So as you can see, Ridge and some of the technologies are selected as the solutions that companies should be looking at if they're starting to look at AI and automated pen testing. We have other different analytics that we can show at the end of this as well. But today we'll be focused on talking just about how that evolution is changing, where it's going, how we can be using AI more efficiently and more effectively. Look, it's about reducing organizational cyber risk by providing clear, continuous, and relevant insight. So without further ado, this is my opportunity to introduce somebody that I respect both professionally and personally. So it's my honor to introduce this person. He has 4 decades, of experience in building cybersecurity solutions for major enterprises, as well as a trusted security leader. He's been invited to speak with executives, for executives, government officials, the ones that are really driving the trends and focusing on reducing that window of opportunity. He's both an inventor, a book author, and also a graduate from MIT. And I'd like to introduce Brett Hartman. Brett, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, you bet. Thank you. So, Brett, as we're talking about the evolution. Obviously, you just saw the the hype cycle, and we're talking about the evolution of vulnerability management. Where do you think, what's driving the evolution from vulnerability management, traditional vulnerability management scanners, to what we're starting to see in CTEM?
Yeah, and thinking about that evolution of vulnerability scanning over the years, scary to say, and to your point, I get to experience it all firsthand, right? From the standpoint of, being on a variety of vendors, working in the field. It's clearly had massive evolution over the scary last 30, 40 years. I mean, really started in the 90s back with things like Satan and, the notion of administrative tools, really focus on mostly network vulnerability scanning and looking at perimeter-based threats. We think about things like, of course, CVEs and CVSS that sort of came with a much more organized way to look at vulnerabilities and prioritize what vulnerabilities need to be addressed. That's great. But in general, what we've seen, and certainly the way people build applications today, is that the applications are far more complicated than this idea that you could just secure a perimeter, right? We talk about the notion of the erosion of the perimeter for years and years, right? And, where historically a lot of the vulnerability scanning world has been focused on things like hardware-based infrastructure scanning at the edge, and then shifting to software-based infrastructures. We think about the cloud. That's, of course, moved very much into embedding within the application itself. Applications don't exist in a single server anymore. They're spread across multiple cloud services, container-based services. We all recognize that. And what we've seen really is vulnerability scanning has evolved along with this architecture right? The application architecture, the way people build things. And so to me, the main driver, and it was pointed out in the video you just played before in the introduction, is about complexity, right? It's like to deal with kind of this notion of vulnerability scanning today. The systems are so complex and so dynamic that that's forced a huge change in this space.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, there's so many. We always talk about it, right? There's a lot of vulnerabilities, but not all vulnerabilities can and will be exploited, right? And all
Right.
these new IoT and new technologies are just creating this massive attack surfaces, which talks about. Next question is threat landscape, or attack surfaces. It just keeps getting bigger. The window of opportunity for hackers is getting bigger, and the approach to vulnerability and exposure management transformation. What do you think that we could be doing better to be more preemptive, um, with our technologies and by reducing that window of opportunity?
Yeah, and I mean, and to the point, it is about that changing attack surface, right? I mean, I think this, as we think about the attack surface, it's again, it's all about complexity, right? The attack surface number one is far more dynamic than it used to be. I mean, it's really even hard to understand what the perimeter even is at this point, right? What is an application? The application itself is continually changing. We're adding new services. We're adding new, interfaces. We're adding new applications. So you have a very dynamic application surface
And it lives so many places.
yeah, exactly. Right. So you don't, the application is just changing up from underneath you. Then you've got, this notion of platforms, right? And the explosion of platforms, everybody uses multiple devices, right? You got mobile devices, you got all the various, operating systems out there. As you mentioned, you've got IoT and all the different, the sprawl of all these various devices, which again makes the attack surface really complicated. And then you've got the threats themselves that continue to evolve. We've talked about advanced persistent threats forever. The sophistication of threats changes. So all these make the attack surface so complicated that, to your question, it really forces this change in how we think about detecting and stopping vulnerabilities, right? And the idea that a vulnerability scan that you could do periodically, best practice is to say once a month or, if you're lucky. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous these days, right? Because in a month's time, your entire environment is completely changed out from underneath you, number one. And number two, to your point, there's still not enough time to fix all the vulnerabilities. You run out of time anyway, right? So there has to be a way that's forced. You're really forced into doing something that's much more dynamic, much more continuous, as you said, based on CTEM, and really built into the development process as opposed to this kind of, thing you do off to the side on occasion. Those to me are really the forcing functions for this.
Yeah, in my experience as well, I have just seen this window of opportunity grow so much, and this is one of the reasons why I came to Ridge, is because one of our focuses is reducing that window of opportunity, right? And it's about how many times we believe it's one of the primary factors is testing more, being able to test more and more continuously and make it more automated. It makes it a lot easier and a lot efficient and effective to be able to test more and get more accurate results to figure out what they could be doing to reduce that window of opportunity. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, totally. I mean, by speeding up the testing, by making it more efficient, you're much more likely to see things sooner, and you can do it at scale that, again, the humans just can't do it, right? To your point. Yep.
No, I agree completely. So next question, I think a lot of us definitely want to know is, like, how aware are the business leaders, the board of directors, the people that are making these cybersecurity decisions? How aware are they about this technology and the evolution and the value they can bring to really focus on where the risk is? I mean, we all know reducing the likelihood and probability of an attack reduces the risk and then the cost of the risk. What are your thoughts on, on that? What do you think that do they know this, and what can we be doing?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of my job for a long time has been to, spend a lot of time with senior executive decision makers around security, CIOs, CISOs, and the like. Clearly, they are aware of this problem. I mean, there is no question, right? There is, absolutely no question. This is top of mind to them. I mean, their jobs are based on it. The problem that I think executives have in this space is just trying to make the call of where to invest and where not to. Right. I mean, and frankly, again, being a security vendor for, and representing vendors for a long time, I mean, it's easy, always easy to say, here's a great new tool, add it, and it's going to solve your life, right?
Yep.
And I mean, and you got to make a call, right? You only have finite money, you have finite resources, you got to make a call. And I do think that business leaders struggle with assessing the effectiveness of any new tool, right? How do you know that this particular tool is worth the investment, right? What's the return on investment, right? And they've got to make those calls. And so I think it's less about awareness and more about ways to aid them to make good decisions about those cost trade-offs, right? It's all about risk. We all know you can't eliminate the risk, right? What's the most effective, efficient way to minimize that risk? So I do think that's primarily it, and I do think the thing to me that's compelling about this space is that the more that tools and penetration testing tools in particular give immediate results, you get better feedback for that efficacy, whereas sort of your classic vulnerability scanning, you know, you get results months later, maybe. I mean, it's just so out of date. So, very current, accurate measurements in terms of weaknesses in your systems is I think, what they want to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. In fact, my technical support, Anisha and I were just on a call before we got on this call. And that just to validate and confirm what you're saying is they said, it's great that you guys can focus on the vulnerabilities, the ones that pose the biggest risk, but helping my team understand where they need to go to focus to mitigate the issue, right? When we talk about detection to action, I think that's what a lot of organizations are looking for. And another thing Ridgebot does really well is really prove out those findings to show that, hey, if this is vulnerability can be exploited by an AI technology, and prove that we can, if you're looking at a SQL injection, prove that we can extract those files and access the schema, which a lot of us in the cyber world know that that's the blueprint of how a database structure is created. That's the value, right? Put them in that direction, reduce that cyber risk or cyber alert and cyber fatigue. So I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. Doing it faster, doing it more effectively. Totally. Yeah.
So, you and I have talked about this a lot. You've been on a lot of different steering committees across different industries throughout your career. How have you seen the recent regulations and compliance requirements influence approach organizations are taking towards vulnerability scanning, CTEM? Are they concerned about regulatory these AI technologies and automated pen testing meeting the requirements?
Yeah, I think there's a few issues there. I mean, first of all, I think most security practitioners recognize that typically, regardless of what industry you're in, the regulatory compliance requirements typically set a pretty low bar, right? They're necessary and you have to do them, right? But I mean, a lot of it is good hygiene, right? It's frankly, if that's all you do for security, that's probably not going to be enough to keep you safe. I mean, it's, again, and I'm not saying it's unimportant. It's crucial. And so to that point, in this space, historically, the world of governance, risk, and compliance has been slow moving, right? It's very conservative. They generally think about static reports. They know, and the history with respect to vulnerability scanning, which has been around a long time, right? This sort of periodic risk assessments is typically the way those compliance requirements work. I think, to me, it's less about the regulations, because most regulations give a lot of flexibility, hopefully, if they're well written, to provide many different technology, solutions to it, right? Some that are a lower bar that I would argue would be more those periodic approaches. And then ones that move into more continuous testing, which give you a much stronger validation, right? The regulations permit it. The next question is, do the auditors understand it? Do they feel comfortable with it? Who is checking on those regulations? Those, I think, not to pick on the poor auditors, but they tend to, they're overwhelmed too. They tend to be a little bit of a laggard with respect to technology for good reason. And so they need to kind of come along for the ride to realize that, that industry has to deal with it, has to have better tools here. So I do think, particularly with the auditing process, that kind of coming along into more of that continuous monitoring approach is critical. So I do think just CTEM more generally with respect to governance, risk, and compliance, it's just natural that there's so much pressure to really adopt these sorts of things into GRC because of the reality, again, back to our original point of the way people build applications. You don't really have a whole lot of choice. If your core processes of how you build applications are, based on CI/CD pipeline and based on the way we are, agile development and the way everybody builds programs today, you have to secure those processes. And GRC, of course, needs to align with where industry is going, right? So I think it takes time, but is clearly going in that direction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. In fact, again, we run into customers all the time wanting to use AI technology to do their pen testing and exposure management. But they seem to be a little hesitant whether it meets the SOC 2 requirement or meets the PCI DSS. And it's nice that we actually have experience with case studies with like a fintech company that is providing financial payment services. We've helped many organizations in this situation where testing is required more on a more continuous basis. And it's becoming, the cost is becoming so much for these organizations. And it's not only just cost, it's the workforce that is required for them to actually come in, do the assessment, do the discovery of the attack surface, look at where the threats are, and then start putting hands on keyboard. It's a lot, and especially with the requirements that are being asked of them. So I couldn't agree more.
And to your point, I mean, we haven't even talked about this, but finding qualified people that can even do the work, right, is challenging, right? There's not enough human beings. Thus, to your point, can we leverage, artificial intelligence, other approaches to make up for the fact that of that limited workforce? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because there's so many organizations that say we're looking for red team engineers. Yeah, okay. What do you? I mean, how much are you willing to pay? This, I'm like, oh, okay, that's really expensive. So a lot of organizations don't have the resource, the budget to pay for these red teaming services. So that is why Ridge Security developed the technology, is to not replace, but enhance, help organizations create this more robust offensive security strategy, so they can help them really focus on the areas. It's needle in the haystack, right? Focus on those. And we hear about it all the time, no false positives. Well, when you can actually see where that risk is and how you were able to exploit those vulnerabilities and get that information to the investigators, I think that's value. I think that's absolutely value. Well, before we continue on, I'd like to know how many of you, we're going to do a poll right now. How many of you have experienced the overwhelming feeling of being bombarded, constant security? We talk about it all the time, by alerts, alert fatigue, cyber fatigue, warnings, updates, to the point where it's become mentally exhausting. That's what we call cyber fatigue, where it's time the engineer just says, I want to go find something else. How many of you guys are experiencing this? If you guys just give us a poll, that would be great. And thank you very much for your time for doing that.
I was going to vote on it, but I see I can't vote. That's too bad.
Oh, I just noticed.
Yeah.
I just noticed I couldn't vote either. I wanted to vote.
We're biasing the vote, so we have to let the
I wanted to vote.
Practitioners do that.
No worries. No worries. But yeah, it's just really been interesting, and what you're talking about with all the different the business leaders that are trying to make better, more efficient, effective decisions. And then you've got the CISOs trying to get the budget that they deserve to go fix the problem. It's just, it's been a challenge. I mean, for me, being in the industry 23 years, I just want to start seeing the amount of breaches start to decrease at some point. And I think closing down that window of opportunity might do it, along with all the great security controls that are out there. All right, so we did get our results, experience. So here's what you guys said. So 54% said yes, occasionally they experience cyber fatigue. We've got 12% says no, not often. And then 34% says yes, frequently. So thank you guys for doing that. We absolutely appreciate that. Hopefully this has really been valuable for you, but we're going to continue this interview and conversation with Brett.
Yeah, I want to find out what those 12% are doing, not to have experienced that fatigue. It's good for them. Good for them if they've managed.
So this is a great segue. So alert and cyber security fatigue appears to be a real issue, right? I mean, I hear about it every time I talk to a SOC analyst or anybody that's investigating alerts. I just want to reduce my noise, fine-tune alerts so I can focus on the things that really put my business at risk, right? So how do you think that, the CTEM is, and AI specifically, is going to address this issue?
Yeah, and to your point, right? Just the general space of receiving security alerts, regardless of where, whether it's from, again, various vulnerability tool or intrusion detection or whatever it is, right? The cyber fatigue, right? That alert fatigue, as you said, I mean, the problem is, seen it over and over again, that so many organizations get so many alerts, right, that they can't even get through the backlog. And then the next day there's more coming at them. And so every day some just fall off the end. And needless to say, there's a little discomfort. The ones that fell off the end that you couldn't address, was there something really important in there? Who knows? Because the next day you got a whole bunch of, another pile to deal with. So, I mean, that's the thing I worry about. It's all those that never got addressed, that are potentially latent problems. That's a scary thing for me. And, to answer your question, I mean, AI, artificial intelligence, is all about automation, right? It's all about taking more of the capabilities of what humans do and, being a better assistant to humans that allow them to be more efficient. For me, this whenever we talk about things like DevSecOps, whenever we talk about the way we build applications today, we generally talk about shift left. The sooner that you can detect and stop a defect, a security defect in your system, the better, right?
Yep.
Lower cost, less likely to deal with some remediation from a disaster later on, right? All those good things. So to me, the thing that's really promising about the continued leverage of AI in this space is just being faster, better scale, making up for humans' capabilities, right? Now, to your point, and we got to be balanced here. I mean, there are challenges in any times we get into this area with false positives. That is the absolute issue that I have heard over and over again. It's great if you see problems, but if you also are adding a number of false alarms that people are going to have to deal with, you're actually making their burden worse. So that automation has got to be good. And I mean, it always needs to be tuned to be able to minimize those. And because of this massive volume, you have to be really good at those false positives to make it be a usable system.
I agree completely. So again, we've talked about this all the time. You've been on many steering committees helping investors. So business management consulting companies and firms, investors are advising CIOs, right, and C-suite colleagues and board of directors to start looking at AI, right, yeah, to benefit their organization and how it pertains to cybersecurity. What would be your advice to an organization or to the stakeholders that are listening today about where they should be starting to look at and how they should start use AI?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, the discussions around artificial intelligence and generative AI and large language models and all that stuff, I mean, it's just constant, right? We get it. You can't avoid any conversation. You know, this morning, listen to the news. They talked all about it. It's just constant. I mean, and the stock market's dealing with it. All the investments are focused on this. Clearly, there's a lot of very excited people across every single domain. Goes without saying. We do need to recognize that in the domain of cybersecurity, this is not a new thing, right? That particularly machine learning has been applied to many different domains in security engineering for at least 10, 15 years, at scale. Intrusion detection, anomaly detection, user and entity behavior analytics, recognizing malware. I mean, there's among many others, right? So there's been a lot of history about, machine learning, classification, and tuning it. And I think most organizations, most security practitioners have real live experience to see it where it works and where it doesn't work so well. And again, back to the false positive, right? So there are, I believe there's definitely consensus that just the broad topic of artificial intelligence, and in particular machine learning, is very effective at addressing a number of security problems. Right. So to me, that goes without saying. The question is, where are we going now, especially with the evolution, especially around generative AI in particular, the newer technologies. We all recognize that it's early days for that, right? And speaking of hype curves, I mean, there's a big hype curve around this, and we're definitely in the early adoption days. And I think it's right, for example, for practitioners to be concerned about hallucinations. That anybody that's used any of these tools, you can see them kind of going off the rails, right? And I think it's good to be conservative, right, with respect to especially those advanced models. So to me, kind of the net of it with respect to the sort of the excitement of these models being able to replace humans in a variety of capacities, including in terms of security management, I think are a little over their skis. I think most of, again, the consensus and the way typically these tools work are as assistants, right? It's sort of the equivalent of having a really sharp person. Maybe they don't know everything, maybe they make mistakes, but to help experienced practitioners, I think that's incredibly effective, right? And that enables the current practitioners to scale better, to see more, right? Because they get more backup that's relatively inexpensive to provide compared to a bunch of humans to do it. And again, keep that sort of the human check and balance in there, because I'm certainly not ready to turn over, my SOC to, entirely AI. Not quite yet, not quite, maybe someday, but yeah, that model I think works really well, and that to me is for the foreseeable future the way it's going to work.
Yep, I agree. Again, I was just on a call, and it was a large organization. And initially, the large organization says, I got all the red team engineers I need. I can test whenever I want, whatever. But after seeing the demo, he's like, I have less experienced engineers. This would be a great tool for them to go sift through and make sure that we're focusing on the right things. I couldn't agree with you more.
I mean, I love that, right? The idea of how do you provide faster adoption of new staff, right? Getting them up to speed faster and trained. I mean, there's so much information
value
at their fingertips that maybe the experienced people already know, and they look at a tool and say, "Oh yeah, that's kind of obvious." But yeah, totally. Folks coming out of school, they can get up to speed far faster. That's huge all by itself.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. So I appreciate that. So I think what we're going to do, Mons, I think we're going to do another poll question. It's going to be, what ways does your organization utilize AI to enhance your cybersecurity posture today? Everybody's trying to improve their cybersecurity posture. So if you guys don't mind taking time to answer that question, that would be great. And we'll move right along. In what ways does your organization utilize AI to enhance its cyber posture?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm making a mental prediction
Prediction?
how people are going to answer this. So we'll see if my model is right or not.
Yeah, well, everybody's doing that. I just say, with the skepticism of AI, just make sure that you are evaluating, you are doing proof of values, doing proof of concept, and making sure that it works with all the different operating systems that you're using, and that your team can see value in it, because there is a lot of value in what AI driven vulnerability management, exposure management can provide organization. We see it every day. All right. All right, so we've got 41 or 50. Let's go. Let's start from the top. 51% not currently utilizing AI for cybersecurity, which I kind of thought that would be the case. And no problem, you're not alone. Then let's go 41. 41% say they're using it for threat detection and prevention. And I don't know if that's how much of that is AI and machine learning, but it doesn't matter. 24% says incident response and mitigation. 22% says vulnerability assessment and patch management, and 19% says they're using it for security analytics and risk assessment. That's good. That's good.
No, I'm a little actually surprised by that. So just for what it's worth, the security analytics and risk assessment is actually a little surprising to me because I think there's most vendors that I've seen, they certainly advertise that they have AI. Maybe people just are not seeing that particular.
That's why I said machine learning.
Yeah. Okay, so that's fair. So it's more, yeah, it's a little bit more specific. And again, I mean, yeah, it's everywhere these days. So that the last comment is sort of interesting. Again, for cyber posture improvement in particular, I think that's fair. Yeah, a lot of it is more on the kind of attack side that you see it used. So interesting results.
So we're closing now. We're going really fast. So I'm going to skip that next one because that was more for me, and I can address that at the end. In
Yep.
your experience and opinion, why aren't more organizations adopting AI penetration testing and continuous threat exposure management today?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of where we're going before, which is security practitioners are inherently a conservative bunch. They need to be, they totally need to be, right? That's their job, right? And so I think it is very fair to ask questions about how much can I trust any new technology? Doesn't matter. Again, we've seen plenty of ones in the past too, right? To be conservative and cautious. Can I trust AI? Will it miss things? What about that false positive rate, as we said before? I think the adoption is like they need to be, they need to be shown that they need to, they naturally should say, prove it, right? Prove it's appropriate. We already talked about audit requirements. I think it's the same thing here, right? Just to make sure that any new technologies are adopted are going to be acceptable for who, again, whatever industry they're working in and whatever those auditors require to make sure it aligns. I think those are probably the major obstacles, and I think it's natural that that's just a matter of time. There's just at the same time so many business pressures in the other direction. I think they'll get.
I agree. I think this is going to be our last question,
okay.
But I think you're the best expert to actually answer this. What would be your recommendation, since you do this all the time for organization? What would be your recommendation or guidance to organizations that are considering using AI and continuous threat exposure management today or in the future?
Yeah. So I do get asked this quite a bit. So again, I'm my background, I've been a CTO. I'm naturally, all about technology. So, but I certainly believe that this space around leveraging AI, CTEM is an inevitable technology transition. I mean, it's again, pretty obvious. So I certainly am convinced that it makes sense to invest now, right? It's still early days in a bunch of ways, but I certainly believe it's part of a much bigger trend that's about embedding security in the application, part of the development process. You just see that over and over, that security and testing penetration testing in particular must be part of how you build applications. And it's that sort of shifting application architecture that forces tactically this investment now, so that the security people can keep up with the developers that are constantly changing the systems. So, I think there's, essentially not a whole lot of choice in that matter, because I think the other tools are they're going to fall by the wayside because they can't keep up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's really good guidance, is because they've got to start looking at it. And that's what I think that we see a lot of organizations that are talking about it internally, but not reaching out to the vendors to say, hey, you know what, I want to look at that technology. One, I think there's a lot of projects on their plate already. And it's just, where do I have time to look at another tool, and not realizing the value that it could provide in saving time and money in resource constraints and making sure that we're focusing on the risk. So I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I agree completely. Great guidance. But that's I think that's the last thing. This will be the good one. What would be your guidance to the board members, executives, on looking at AI? How would we reach out to them and bring them value and help them understand how they might be able to reduce organizational risk at the most optimal cost with AI technology? And then I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, working with chief security officers, who are typically the ones that have to answer that question every day, right? They're the ones that have to represent that they've got this risk with respect to cybersecurity in hand for their company, represent that to the board and senior leadership. And that's a tough job, right? To how you take things that are highly technical, highly subjective. It's all about risk. There's no guarantee that, that you're going to get it perfect. You still get breached sometimes, things happen. And yet CISOs have to represent to those business leaders and board leaders that those risks are managed. And so to me, I think from that standpoint, the challenge that CISOs have here is just having good ways to communicate this highly technical data that you get out of tools that may not necessarily be appropriate for a board member, say, that doesn't have the security background, right? That doesn't really necessarily understand all this technology. So I love tools that do a good job visualizing results, to be able to put it in a way, not to be insulting, but it's the big animal pictures, right? You put it in a way that you can really net the reduced cost, right? That we talked about, reducing costs, managing costs, and managing risk. And also the other thing that's interesting on the other side is the like we said, the more testing that you do, the more likely it is that the resolving and minimizing the cost of a breach is actually going to be better, right? So remediation, which is the other side of it, right? If the more you're reducing attack surface and doing that testing up front, the more likely it is you're going to reduce the costs on the other side if something does go wrong. So I think it's all about cost avoidance, right? To be able to communicate that and at a very high level to business leaders.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, again, it was my personal and professional honor to actually have this opportunity to interview you, have this conversation. So Brett, on behalf of everybody at Ridge Security, really thank you very much. We look forward to the next time, and hopefully this was benefit everybody that had joined, and thank you again for your time. But this is Ridge Security, and I want to talk to you a little bit about our technology. So Ridge Security Technology is focused on reducing organizational cyber risk by providing our customers with clear, continuous, and relevant insight. And we do that with our flagship product, the RidgeBot. It's a fully automated continuous penetration testing technology that combines our ethical hacking techniques along with our AI-driven decision-making algorithms. It allows us to look at attack surfaces that are the biggest threat, to efficiently and effectively locate vulnerable targets, to go a step further and use AI technology to exploit those vulnerable targets, prioritize that cyber risk by proving out the findings, by actually being able to see what files we were able to extract in the schema and then prioritize that cyber risk by providing accurate reports on exploited vulnerabilities, getting the workload to the cyber teams that really can benefit from it. Get that hands-on keyboard. So one of the things that we're really proud of, and I talked about Gartner, there's a lot of different things that Gartner does. They've got the Magic Quadrant, they've got the hype cycle, but one thing that is really special to us here at Ridge Security is the point of view of the customer, the Gartner Peer Insight. We are absolutely in the right place. We love that the people that are actually using our technology love our technology, like that it's easy to use, like that it's fast, and like that it helps them figure out the risk a lot faster. So we are reducing organizational cyber risk by providing clear, continuous, relevant insight. And thank you. Do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions? Please leave. There we go. If anybody has any questions, Brett's still here. We can answer any of those questions that anybody might have.
Glad to address anything. Anybody?
I think we got a couple questions. Give me a minute. Also, if someone else has questions, I see there's someone raising their hand. So if you want to leave a question, feel free to do that. Okay, so the questions I got are the following. So how can organizations ensure that AI-driven vulnerability management solutions effectively adapt to emerging cyber threats in real time?
The question is how to share that in terms of the results.
So basically, like, how can AI-driven vulnerability management can like adapt constantly? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and I'll start it generally, and Mike, I'll turn it over to you to just from your perspective. But to me, the thing that makes exactly the point of AI-driven technologies is that they're adaptive, exactly to that point. The problem with kind of historical tools is that they're totally fine for known vulnerabilities. Known attacks, they're great, right? It's a rules-based approach. It's not an AI-based approach. You have a static set of rules, and that's awesome, right? And we all recognize that there are plenty of attacks from years ago that still are used. So it's important to be able to detect and stop those. But the thing that's much harder for practitioners to deal with is to keep up with the latest attacks, the very newest vulnerabilities that have just shown up, yesterday that you didn't have a chance to read about. And to me, the thing that makes AI-based approaches so relevant is they're much more likely to keep up with the latest. Again, this notion of dynamic testing means that recent things that are either 0 days or have a few days old that you probably don't have time to adjust to, that the tools can. So that, I think, is to me the most relevant thing with respect to the space and being able to show its effectiveness. It's those near-term threats.
Yeah, I think I think that's excellent, Brett. I think if you leave your email for us, we can actually get you a technical answer. I'll have Anish respond to that. But I would say that our expert model, our AI technology, also has a feedback loop that looks at other threats in other areas and moving unilaterally. So there is an intelligent factor to that, but Brett is absolutely right. I mean, there is that situation where 0 day, this is looking primarily at things that are out there. The AI technology is only as smart as much as you educate it, right? So good thing for Ridgebot is we have over 36,000 plugins and absolutely growing. So great question. Make sure you put your email in there. Either go to my LinkedIn or just send us an email and I'll make sure that you get a good answer. Any more
Perfect.
questions?
We also got a question in the chat, another one that says, there is on the roadmap of RichBot to crack hashed passwords. And if RichBot can sniffing network to detect credentials.
Yeah, that is gonna have to be that, and I'm gonna actually do an event with Anish, actually, and so we'll be able to answer that question. But if you don't mind, if we could just get an email of those, that'd be great, and I'll make sure that we get a response to you.
And Lydia responded in the chat too as well.
Oh, she did. Excellent.
Yeah.
We used brute force to test weak passwords based on the customized dictionary.
Yeah.
She says.
Thank you.
Yeah, good,
Thank you,
good
Lydia.
practice there. Got to educate those folks on weak passwords. Of course, you know, again, to me, I can't stand passwords, and why isn't everybody using MFA anyway? But we'll leave that alone.
That is, but that is one of the test scenarios that we have. Every task is connected to an entity called a scenario, which is a pen testing use case. One of those is weak password credentials. So we have a dictionary, like Lydia was saying, is we have a dictionary. So if you're running a test on passwords that may not be so strong, so we have individual tests like that, like third-party frameworks. We're bringing in, web apps that use popular, third-party apps, just like MoveIn or MoveIt. We don't know how secure those applications are, and we're bringing them in-house. And RidgeBot actually has the ability to test for those things too. How is RidgeBot specifically going to remain up to date with the changing technology and exploits?
Good question.
That is a great question. We have a bunch of different developers that are constantly looking for new exploits, vulnerabilities, and that's how we're educating the AI technology. And if I can get a better response from Lydia or Nick or somebody else on my team that's more technical, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll get back to you with an email on that one.
There are also ways, and I'm sure RidgeBot is looking at this too, to leverage AI in that sense, right? To be able to leverage AI to, in fact, use it, it's a learning technology, to keep up with new changes, right? To be able to kind of keep an eye on what's out there in a way to ingest and keep RidgeBot updated.
Wait, great. We also got Gabriel. I'll let him activate his microphone to make his question.
Thank you, Lydia.
Hey, Gabriel, can you hear us? I think he can't.
Oh, he was there. Now he's muted.
Okay, so I think we're done.
I think that's
Is
it.
there any other question?
Gabrielle, if you want to go ahead and email us, you can do it at michael.wilson@ridgesecurity.ai. And I will make sure anybody, if you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email and I'll make sure that those questions all get answered. Absolutely. Other than that, again, I want to thank Brett Hartman. Absolutely fantastic. We appreciate you being here. And everybody that took time out to attend this event, thank you very much. We hope it was productive and valuable to you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.